You listen to the Worst of the Worst podcast with me, Matty.
And me, Matt.
And John.
Today we're going to be talking about the worst cult.
You could say Marvel is a cult, man. I don't think Marvel's that good, but if you say Marvel's not that good, or like Star Wars, if you say Star Wars isn't that good, and I don't think Star Wars is that good, people look at you funny.
But I also disagree in the sense because no one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. Like, the original trilogy is the Bible, and everything that comes after and before.
We want something new. Give us something new. Oh, but this is not what I wanted. No. This is too new.
It's so different.
I know.
And then we give them what you want. So, like, episode 7 is like, this is the same as episode 4.
It's the same thing over again.
What did he want? Did he just want Harrison Ford to come back out and do his thing?
They want women to be subservient and to like never have to work a day in their lives. That's what they want. My cult. Everybody who is a thinking person already is aware of this organization. We already know it's a cult. What makes my organization or cult the worst, in my opinion, is that it is allowed to operate in plain sight. It is the only major cult that I know of that is allowed to continue its practices
to this very day.
To this day, indefinitely. This is the only thing that I've researched for this podcast, and I use the term research lightly, that I thought maybe I shouldn't talk about this because they can literally come after us.
They could.
Terrifying.
Yeah, right. I was thinking,
they could be listening right now.
If we had more time, I might have chosen a different organization. So mine is the Church of Scientology.
Of course.
That is, like I said, I think they're the worst because they are, one, hiding in plain sight. Everyone knows they suck except for them, and they are still allowed to continue doing what they're doing. No repercussions. Two, they are very modern. They're very much still with us.
Yeah, the churches still exist around
still
the
with
world.
us. So the most of my research has been done through watching or reading Going Clear, which is a documentary, and the book Going Clear is by Lawrence Wright. So essentially, he makes I think a pretty compelling case that Scientology is extremely damaging, and not just because it's modern, but the way it's allowed to operate. The way it's allowed to operate is insane in this modern world. It perpetuates itself. So while it might not have the body count of the cults, like your Anabaptists or Matt's, it doesn't need a body count because violence isn't the goal.
Yeah,
violence is just a means to the goal, which seems to be money for David Miscavige.
And initially L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, exactly. So L. Ron Hubbard, I believe, still holds the Guinness record for most books published. He was a science fiction writer during the age of Pulp Fiction. So he would just churn out science fiction all day. So he's got a fantastic imagination.
Was he any good at it?
He seemed pretty popular.
So, I mean, I've read that critics thought it was very run-of-the-mill, very average. He wasn't successful by any means. Like, he wasn't raking in the dough from his science fiction novels. He was just, like, he would publish for magazines and, like, science fiction novels, like anthologies.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't the most, well-known science fiction.
He's no Isaac Asimov.
Yeah.
And is it significant that he's a sci-fi writer?
Oh, yes, 100%.
Like, am I a complete gobshite for saying that Scientology's a sci-fi novel?
Not at all. We'll get into that. I don't want to get too much into theology because it's absolutely batshit crazy. But he was a prolific sci-fi writer, right?
Yeah.
He goes into World War II. He is discharged. He's relieved of command from his post because he fires on some Mexican islands. He shoots on a log floating in the Pacific. He's
so he's just bad at his job.
He's just incompetent, right? He's incompetent. He got involved with some cults in Los Angeles, and he's a science fiction writer. So he decided the way to really make money is to make a religion.
And was he open about that?
There's a famous quote from him saying, "There's no real money in writing science fiction. The real way to make money is to start a religion."
So if you're a follower of that religion or cult, whatever you want to call it, and he said that,
Donald Trump said he loved uneducated people.
Yeah.
When you want to believe something, it doesn't really matter what they say. He wrote this book called Dianetics in the 1950s. And to be honest with you, in the 90s, I remember seeing ads for Dianetics on TV.
Really? So
It was like they called it a guidebook to the human mind. Dianetics, a guide to the human mind. And I remember being like, "Mom, we should get that."
That sounds good. Yeah.
These are they're big questions, right? They ask big things, and
Yeah, these guys got the answers.
shouldn't we at least look into it? You know what I mean? And my mom was like, "No."
Let me stop you there.
Yeah, we're not. Let's
She wouldn't let you watch The Simpsons, but she also wouldn't let you read Dianetics. She had her standards.
She had her standards. Yeah, as she does today. So good on her for that. Thank you, Mom. Appreciate that one. So he wrote Dianetics in the 50s, I believe it was. Yeah, early 50s, and he was raking in a lot of money from these talks. He would give lots of talks, like $500 in the 50s.
So sorry, Dianetics is like his manifesto, like
Essentially, think of it as the Scientology Bible.
Okay. Yeah. And he's openly saying this isn't fiction. This is religion.
Because essentially what Dianetics is a self-help book. He's strayed away. He's strayed away from science fiction at this point. Now he's writing a self-help book, essentially.
Okay.
Essentially a self-help book. What I've read makes a convincing argument that he genuinely believed his own stuff. He wrote to the American Psychological Association, trying to get his work out there.
Yeah. And
they didn't really seem to know what to make of it. It seemed mostly gobbledygook.
Just batshit crazy writings.
But this what they call sessions. What they would do for all initiates, they hook you up to a machine. What you remember what it's called, Matt?
E-meter readers, something.
E-meter, thank you. Something like that. Essentially hook you up and measure certain fields of energy coming off your body. But it's essentially therapy.
Okay.
Essentially, you just talk about traumatic experiences in your life.
But you're like hooked up to a machine while you're doing it.
So basically, it's like you're almost doing a lie detector test. You're holding onto these two poles, and these two poles are meant to, like what John said, like measure your bodily energy, and then you just have to almost confess your deepest, darkest secrets as a form of therapy, and like you unloading that onto your session master or whoever was running the session. That was your form of therapy. It was like almost confession in a sense.
So think of it as therapy or a confessional, but without any of the legal protections that a patient for a therapist or at a church would have.
Was this done with any kind of calculated malicious purpose, like we're going to use this information against you, or was it therapeutic?
We will get into that.
Okay.
In the 50s, he develops these essentially there's courses, right? So every level that you go on to the next step of Scientology, there's more and more money, right? More and more money. In the 60s, he ends up fleeing America and he sails around.
Why does he flee?
Because he's fleeing tax evasion, is my understanding, and fraud.
Yeah.
And he goes to the Canary Islands, essentially, and he calls his most devout followers to the Canary Islands with him. They're called the Sea Org, or Sea Organization.
Mm-hmm.
And they go around to different ports in the Mediterranean and recruit people. One of the punishments at the Sea Org, because it became increasingly dictatorial, was to just be thrown overboard, literally from 30, 35 feet. Just
what kind of stuff would you do that would displease the Scientology overlord?
Question him.
Basically, it was anything that would speak out against Scientology. If you had the slightest thoughts that what you were doing was not in the line of Scientology's goals, you were speaking out against the church, and you would be punished accordingly.
And what's the pull? When they're going and recruiting new members, what's the pull? What are they saying to them?
So I didn't want to get too much into theology because I'm probably not going to do it justice, whatever that means. But one half of your brain is super analytical, like a perfect computer.
Yeah.
And one half of your brain is reactive and emotional, and essentially fucks up the other half.
Mm-hmm.
By doing these sessions, you can eventually, what they call, you can go clear. You can make it so that the analytical part of your brain is the only thing that's operating.
Okay.
So you can essentially become perfect. Is the way it's portrayed. You can go clear, but there are always more levels for you to reach, right?
So, is this religion like a human religion? It's about you and your own self-help, or is it a godly religion?
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Initially, yes.
And so originally, yes, it is very much self-help. They can make all your dreams come true.
Yeah.
Right? L. Ron Hubbard finally smuggles himself back into the States. So at a certain point, all these countries in the Mediterranean say, hey, you're not welcome. Go fuck off. So he goes back to the States and he's in hiding this whole time. He does not appear publicly as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, this guy, L. Ron Hubbard, I should have said this earlier, he is, besides just being a science fiction writer, he has, had a wife and daughter and abandoned them. He has taken on money from their bank accounts. He is objectively not the nicest guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Objectively not a great dude. He lies about his military service. He says he's a war hero when he is literally the opposite of a war hero.
A lot of the stories he tells down the line, you can factually prove him wrong. Like everything he said he's done. Almost all the achievements that he had received, that he had claimed, have all been proven wrong later in life. Like everything he said is just a complete fucking farce.
But I want to state that in fairness to L. Ron Hubbard, he did seem to believe his own bullshit. He did seem to believe it. In Going Clear, somebody makes a very good point that he could have taken the money and run many times.
But what about the power?
Well, I mean, he with money is power, right? He could have gone somewhere. He chose when he came back to the States. They started operating in Hollywood, and it was a conscious effort to make celebrities ambassadors for Scientology. Very conscious effort, and people started to move higher and higher up in the Sea Org and throughout Scientology. And when they get to, I believe it's OT2 is the...
This is a level in the faith, and you have to pay to reach these levels.
Hundreds or thousands of dollars.
Literally, you mortgage your houses. Like there is only money that gets you through these levels.
And what do you gain?
Resources, like the study materials, that's what you get. Like, so you pay for the study materials so that you can prove that you're worthy.
So it's like, we'll show you the first chapter of the Bible.
Yes.
But if you want the second chapter.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
That
exactly.
is it.
You pay per pay-per-view. And you could have been in Scientology for years, right? Spent hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars, on it. And you still, it's at this point in this stage in your Scientology career, it's essentially just the self-help thing. It's a community.
Yep.
There's not a whole lot of theology. You get to, I believe it's OT2. Scientologists, please correct me if I'm wrong. You get to OT2, and at least in Going Clear, they talk about getting, I'm sure now it's not the same physical copy, but a copy of L. Ron Hubbard's handwritten work.
Yes.
And essentially, the theology, I'm not gonna do it justice for how fucking nuts it is, but it reads like something that L. Ron Hubbard would have written in the 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
Essentially, there was an alien world, overpopulated, Xenu, the Emperor.
And this comes after Scientology's first, created or thought of. It doesn't start off with this creation story.
No. So
Yeah.
you only get to learn about these alien worlds and the Overlord Xenu when you get to OT level 6, 7, 8. Like you don't even know that the Overlord Xenu exists.
There's something appealing to that. If the idea is there's always more knowledge to learn.
Yeah.
We've got more to reveal if you just pay the money and get the access. There's something to that, isn't there? That's going to be appealing to people.
But there's also something to be said about in Going Clear. I can't remember which person makes a good point that if you ask any member of a major religion to describe their religion to you within in a nutshell, they can do it within a minute.
Yeah.
Right? They can get the basic points.
Yeah.
In Scientology, you could be involved for years before you really get the theology. And the theology, so alien world, Emperor Xenu decides to deal with overpopulation by what? He freezes people, takes them to Earth, which is a prison planet, drops them into volcanoes, which theoretically in this theology existed, millions of years before we know they did.
Yeah.
Drops them in the volcano, drops A-bombs onto them, because you need to do that.
Of course, you have to.
I mean, that's realistically, you don't just need to freeze them or send them to a prison planet. You also drop an A-bomb on them. That's how you deal with
sounds
things.
pretty watertight to me. And obviously the aliens have A-bombs.
Obviously. They live in a society very similar to the 50s. Don't you know?
Of course.
Don't you
they do.
know?
Of course. They do.
I mean, obviously. So so all this is true, right? And then the spirits of these A-bombed aliens essentially enters an infant's body at the time of birth.
The Thetans.
The Thetans, thank you. The Thetans. So sometimes you right. So you can be
Fuck me.
so you can be entered or penetrated, if you will, by thousands of Thetans. Potentially. So potentially
I'd love to be entered by
Yeah.
1,000 Thetans.
So potentially, Maddie, you've been penetrated by thousands of Thetans and you have no idea.
I feel them in my gut.
All of the bad feelings you have are these Thetans, and you need to find them.
It's all starting to make sense.
You gotta find them and remove them. It makes total sense when you think about it. Most people don't really want to, they're not smart enough to comprehend
Exactly. Yeah.
that they're really being tortured by the souls of dead aliens.
I didn't realize I'd be converted.
Yeah, this
episode,
is not
but-
my intention for tonight.
But where do I sign up?
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
So that's the theology. But again, you don't know this until you're very invested, right?
Yeah.
Until all your friends are Scientologists, until you spent hundreds of dollars on it.
Hundreds of thousands, close to sometimes.
At least. One of the I believe his name is Paul Haggis. There's a famous director in Going Clear who talks about when he reached this stage and read this document by L. Ron Hubbard. He thought that it was a sanity test, like you were supposed to reject it. That was his first thought. Was this can't.
Because it's so ludicrous. It's so ridiculous.
Clearly, if you believe this, you're not fit for Scientology.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the theology that they are actually peddling.
So if you're not rich, can you be a member of this religion? Can you
Yes.
access it?
Yeah, the hardcore members of Scientology, what they call the Sea Org, started in the 60s as the people on L. Ron Hubbard's boats going across the Mediterranean. The Sea Org, they are estimated at the time of the book and documentary to make between 6 and 40 cents an hour.
And the shit they're
Oh.
doing on these boats is proper manual labor. Like you're scrubbing down floors with toothbrushes.
Why?
Because you can get closer to L. Ron Hubbard and Going Clear and
Meeting Xenu.
meeting Xenu or whatever. You don't need to be rich to be a Scientologist. You can be part of the Sea Organization where you're essentially slave labor.
Just to interject you, if I do remember correctly, in order to join the Sea Org, because you can obviously be a part of Scientology and not be in the Sea Org, but in order to be part of the Sea Org, you need to sign a billion-year contract.
Yeah, I believe it was a billion years.
A
believe it was
billion-year
a billion
contract.
Yeah, I believe it was a billion years. Something similar. It's for an insane amount of time. In the 70s, L. Ron they go to California, right? And they make a conscious effort to have celebrities be ambassadors to the cause. And one of the big ones is John Travolta.
Oh.
Right, John Travolta, I believe he's still a Scientologist to this day. They make a really conscious effort to get famous people to become Scientologists and pitch them.
Will and Jada Smith also donated a bunch of money towards Scientology schools or schools in the Scientology cult. Even though they're not Scientologists themselves, they donated money towards it. That lead actress from Handmaid's Tale, Elizabeth Moss, she's a Scientologist. And I don't know if you remember that 80s show with Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis.
Yeah,
Do you remember the frizzy head stoner?
Yeah.
Danny Masterson. He's a Scientologist and he's recently been implicated in a bunch of sexual assault charges through Scientology. The Scientology church is helping his defense case. I'm not sure if it's cleared now. I haven't followed up. He's a Scientologist too.
So is there like a networking element to this?
Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%. So yeah, you give them tons of money, right? You build connections. They will make things, or they can make things happen for you.
Yeah.
You are essentially telling them in these sessions your deepest, darkest secrets, and they're always asking you to go deeper, find more things. Always, they are goading you into giving you all of your info.
And these sessions are all recorded
It's pretty smart.
and stored.
All recorded. So, hey, you know what? I think this is kind of bullshit. I'm going to go. Well, okay, but we're going to tell everyone about the time you dreamt you're going to fuck your mother.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They just have a shit ton of blackmail on you all the time from these e-meter sessions.
So I understand that. What I don't understand is if that's such a well-known practice, why does it get new recruits?
People search for a greater need to belong, and Scientology is incredibly welcoming because they don't preach theology, and like John said, at the lower levels. They preach that you can find happiness, true happiness, without having to follow a certain religion.
Yeah.
It's like you find it within yourself. And a lot of people are like, wow, I would love that. I would love to be able to be a better person through whatever means you're about to offer me.
And you do a couple sessions, it probably feels great. You know, therapy can feel really, really good to get the stuff off your chest.
Get the stuff off your chest, yeah?
There's stuff to it psychologically at the lower levels. It's not completely...
It's not mumbo jumbo from the start. No, there's a therapeutic element towards it. And a lot of Scientologists will probably to this day claim that it's helped them and absolutely changed their lives.
It probably has helped people initially. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But that's just the start, right? L. Ron Hubbard didn't leave a succession plan. This guy, David Miscavige, was a Scientologist since he was 11.
Whoa.
And he steps into the breach, essentially. Here's where it gets way worse. So,
can I just ask, as
Sure.
a Scientologist, do you live a normal life and you're
Yeah.
just a Scientologist on top of it? Or is your life like completely pervaded by this?
So there are two types of Scientologists. So you do get the people that live day-to-day lives as Scientologists. But then if you join the Sea Org as one of their like military members, you go onto the boats and you work as a Sea Org member, scrubbing floors with toothbrushes. And
That's still a thing.
the Sea Org is still a thing. In the 80s, there were a number of lawsuits against Scientology for reasons such as having a place called the Rehabilitation Project Force. There was a floor in their Scientology center in LA where essentially it was like a prison. You worked, it was what, 30 hours on, 3 hours off?
Yep.
So if you were...
And you signed up for this.
You signed up for this. They didn't say here sign to go to the RPF, but you're part of the church. You've wronged them. You've wronged us. You need to be rehabilitated. This is how we're gonna rehabilitate you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Through this labor. And I believe the FBI raided Scientology in the 80s. Maybe it was the late 70s.
And did they raid them just because they thought that they were a...
Tax evasion, human trafficking,
Oh.
etc., etc. So shit's hitting the fan when David Miscavige takes over in 86, and by I believe it's 1993, they owe over $1 billion in back taxes because L. Ron Hubbard has refused to pay taxes because they are a religion in his mind.
And did he make a lot of money off this?
Yes,
all the money.
L. Ron Hubbard
All
made
the money.
all the money. Because remember, every level of Scientology requires a greater investment.
Mm-hmm.
Every level, constantly. But at this time, it's not tax free. Your donations. So, and there, I can't remember exactly what the numbers are, but at the time that the tax bill would have bankrupted Scientology had they paid what they owed the IRS in the United States alone would have bankrupted them.
And did they get away with it?
Yes. So it was existential crisis, right? What they decided to do was Operation, I believe it's called Snow White.
Operation Snow White, yep.
Over 2,400 lawsuits to the IRS from different members of the church. And their whole point was L. Ron Hubbard was very specific, and you always attack, you never defend. So they went after...
Fair game.
A fair game, exactly, a fair game. Everything that does not help the church, everything that doesn't allow people to get better is fair game. Always attack, never defend. So 2,400 lawsuits against the IRS, and they decided to take down the IRS, and it worked.
How the fuck did they take down the IRS?
So I know that they had 2 agents that had been implanted in the IRS, and they had managed to infiltrate so deep into the system that they had managed to get all of the information that the IRS had on Scientology, and in an attempt to wipe it clean, they had managed to get Scientology tax exempt status as a religion.
So with these agents, they're like, what, they've got themselves in high positions?
High positions in the IRS, they're just members of the church that have now
IRS is like a tax agency in America.
The Internal Revenue Service. And yeah, they managed to become tax exempt. They had suspected that up to about 500 agents across the globe had managed to put themselves into positions in tax services around the world or tax organizations around the world to try and get Scientology exempt as a religion.
So the main difference between a cult and a religion, right, is what the IRS determines. If the IRS determines that you are a religion, you get First Amendment rights, which essentially means that you don't pay taxes and the government
Can't go after you.
really can't touch you
Yeah.
as long as it is an inter-religion or like inter-church deal.
Yeah.
An outside party could sue for whatever reason, but as long as it's within the church,
Yeah.
it's church practice. Sorry.
But they didn't get tax exempt legally, of course. Like, this was all done.
Well, so in 93, they essentially tell the IRS, hey, we will drop these 2,400 charges against you if you, and they big PR campaign, right? They're going full court press here. If you drop these charges, or we will drop the charges if you grant us status of a religion, if you drop our tax debt and let us go free.
Scientology has charges against the IRS. They've been in there that deep that they have found criminal activity from them.
It was 2,400 charges on anything that they thought they could get the IRS on. For individuals in Scientology,
Right.
the churches, like, they're just trying to bog them down. It's the classic Steve Bannon move, flood the zone with shit, right? You know what I mean? There is going to be so much shit coming at the IRS. They will not be able to tell heads from tails, and they're going to want it to go away.
Yeah.
Right? They don't have the resources. They don't have the time. They don't have the people. They will stop. And it worked. It worked. They told them that they would drop the charges if they would be granted, a religious status as a religious organization, and it worked. So the IRS,
Are they still tax exempt?
they are tax exempt to this
To
day.
this day, yeah.
They're
That's fucking atrocious that it's public knowledge that the only reason they're tax exempt is because they've got debt.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's all it is.
That's-
100%.
It's not even dirt. It's literally just. I mean, yeah, the IRS isn't perfect, sure, but it's not even dirt. It's like we just have the resources to slow you down, right?
They also have like a policy called fair game, if
Yeah.
I'm right. So basically, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't researched this in a while, but let's say you've left the church, or you're speaking out against the church, or even if you're an outsider investigating in, they have a policy called fair game where their members can basically go after you and use whatever means necessary to silence you. And that's part of the church's policy. It's called fair game. If someone speaks out against the church, you can do whatever the fuck you want to them in order to silence them.
That's another common theme with cults, isn't it? It's like, if you are against us, if you're not with us, you're against us, and we will
100%.
fucking
Yeah,
kill
because
you.
we are so right. How could you, if you don't like us, then you must be evil.
But I
Right?
mean, even if you're a family member, let's say you come to the conclusion like, Scientology might not be the thing for me. I guess I'm leaving. If your whole family is part of Scientology, they are forced to cut ties with you. You cannot speak to your family if they leave Scientology. And if you leave Scientology, you cannot speak to your family. They will cut you off and disown you. You lose all ties, all connections with anyone that was ever part of your community, your upbringing. You have to leave them go. That's just the way it is.
They're a suppressive person.
Yeah, absolutely. They're a suppressive person. So they're out against they're out to get you. So you need to cut all ties. Close relationships, families are destroyed and ruined by Scientology because of this.
And it also made lots of these lawsuits. They did have to pay a large fine in Oregon for different abuses, but in general, because they're now a religious organization, all these lawsuits against them disappear because it's a religious thing, and it's no longer considered fair game for the FBI.
So they're being very successful in what they've tried to do.
That is, in my opinion, why they are the worst cult, because they are. This is my opposite argument from the serial killer podcast. They are the worst because they are
The best at it.
They are really good at it. They're really good at it. So most religious organizations, they need to show that they are contributing to the faithful in some way. That's how they can prove that they are a religious organization, that they're actually giving something. And the way Scientology has chosen to show their generosity is by buying massive amounts of real estate in very high demand areas
Clearwater, one of them.
all around the world. So they have in of 2015, they had at least several $1 billion in assets, physical and liquid.
But like anecdotally, a lot of people say they'll drive through these like Scientology owned towns or areas, and they're just at the moment just like abandoned ghost towns. Like it's eerie to drive through, and then the few people that are there are like people standing outside churches, like making sure you don't look in, or maybe making sure you're not getting too close to the church, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, like, oh, do you want to join Scientology?
So there are Scientology towns.
So there's a town, I'm not sure in which state in the States it is, but there's a town called Clearwater, which is a Scientology town. The cops are Scientologists, the doctors are Scientologists, everyone that live there are Scientologists.
Oh my God.
It's scary.
And did everybody who wasn't a Scientologist leave and everyone who was arrive, or did the city just get converted?
I think it's probably the former. Look, it's probably a combination of both, but it could be one of those situations where they just bought up a massive land and then the congregation moved there. We'd have to fact check this to be sure.
That's amazing though, that there's a town of Scientology. I had no idea.
Yeah, Clearwater, look it up. It's quite eerie. But like, let's say you've shown a slight interest in Scientology, or you are a former Scientologist, they will track you down for the rest of your life. People have changed names, changed states, changed phone numbers, changed email addresses, and Scientology still tracks you down and sends you these letters and sends you these emails just preaching Scientology. Like they have this weird network where they're able to find you no matter where you are, who you are, wherever you are on the planet, they can find you, and they're still monitoring you. They have people on Reddit. They literally have people on Reddit and social media, and their whole job is to monitor social media to make sure no one's speaking out against Scientology. And if you do, that gets reported back to David Miscavige and the church, and then that tries to get taken down.
They're fucking terrifying.
They are genuinely scary. So there's people wonder why a lot of these celebrities stay with them. Well, it's because the church knows everything about them, will destroy them or harass them mercilessly until just harass you forever.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond blackmail and harassment. So this guy David Miscavige, whether he's a true believer or not, I genuinely don't know. That's not for me to say. But he's become increasingly paranoid, and he sent lots of the higher ranking members of the state organization to a place called The Hole in their compound in California.
Yeah,
where horrific conditions, overexposure, basically starving, ants everywhere, just horrific conditions. People have spent years of their life in the hole, essentially almost like Soviet-style self-criticism, right?
Well, why is this to police them? Like
to police them, to
punish defectors,
to assert control over the organization, right? If you did something wrong, you are here for a reason. You need to tell us why. Right,
wow.
that level of, and so some people spent years and years of their lives in the hole. They claim that David Miscavige himself has publicly assaulted them at these. I mean, horrific,
savage beatings. At
a minimum. He talks about one thing the documentary talks about is a game of musical chairs, where the last person standing has to leave the hole, and people are fighting to stay in the hole because they are a believer, and they will do they are clawing each other's eyes out to be allowed to stay in these prison conditions.
Wow, they are truly fucking manipulated at this point.
Yeah, and so this is all allowed to happen legally. Legally allowed to go on, right? That's why they are the worst cult, because they have gamed the system so successfully that they really cannot be touched.
Do you think this is at its core just a money-making scheme, or is there something more to it than that?
I don't want to psychoanalyze people who I've never spoken to or met.
Yeah.
In the documentary and book, they think that L. Ron Hubbard was really psychoanalyzing himself, and they think that at least the self-help stuff is really a genuine attempt to make sense of his own mind.
Right. Right.
Whether David Miscavige believes any of it, I have no idea.
He is the Jan Van Leyden to the Jan Matthias.
He's been in it since he was 11, right?
He was also L. Ron's like prodigy.
He was a prodigy at the sessions. He went clear very quickly, as they would say. But I don't. Yeah. My understanding is that L. Ron Hubbard never left a succession plan.
No.
David Miscavige was the man who he fought
engineered his way to the top.
Engineered it, and now he will keep it to the top. So one of the things they talk about in the documentary, lots of people in the Sea Org eventually left after years in the hole. They're like, okay, we're done with this after decades of mental abuse. And Anderson Cooper has a segment where all of their wives come on to defend Scientology, and the wives will repeat the same talking points between themselves, almost word for word, because they have been coached
and trained and literally, like you say, coach, sorry.
When they're done, they go right back to the hole, right? This like prison environment where it's just horrific abuse, right? Like that's how, I mean, it really is brainwashing, right?
What do you think is Scientology's overall goal?
Money. Perpetuating itself.
Yeah.
As far as I know, it seems to be money. You know what I mean? If as far as charitable works, I don't know about anything they've done that's charitable. As far as beneficial causes, charities, I don't know of anything.
Do you? I don't know, it's not our place to say, but do you think people who follow this believe in any of the doctrine, or do you think that's just a side thought and it's about something different?
I think on a lower level, like if you're one of the OT1, OT2 Scientologists, like you truly believe in what you're studying and what you're following. As you get high up the levels, the more you found out, I think you like get promoted to the higher ranks, and then you start seeing like other benefits of it, whether it be financial benefits, power benefits. It's a very complex, messy web of a fucking religion. It's hard to say that there's one ideal goal, I think.
It really, for a member, it can be a huge benefit, right? It can be a huge benefit. If you are valuable and important, they will take care of you. If Tom Cruise wants a new limo, they said the Sea Org will build it for them. Things like that, right? If essentially almost slave labor. Like, I don't want to toss the term slave around too flippantly, but people who are doing labor for 40 cents an hour is it's pretty bleak.
If you had to put your money on it, is Tom Cruise a Scientologist because he's being blackmailed, or does he believe it?
Because he's being blackmailed, or because I think there's a third option. He's being blackmailed, he believes it, or he benefits from it.
Yeah.
He has made it public that he's taken a step away from it to reconnect with his children or reconnect with his daughters. So I'm not sure how deep in it he is currently, but he's made it public that he's like, well, I was a Scientologist, maybe he still is, but his goal now is to reconnect with family that he had to basically cut off because he was a Scientologist. Like Katie Holmes managed to escape Scientology. Like they were only introduced through Scientology. He was basically given Katie Holmes as his wife. That's because that's what they do.
They arrange marriages.
I mean,
if Tom Cruise wants a girlfriend, they will find Tom Cruise a girlfriend. You gotta remember, Tom Cruise is for whatever fucking reason I've never quite figured out, he is a huge movie star.
Yeah. Same, by the way.
I really don't. He's not even. He's got a weird smile. I don't get it, but whatever. He's a huge movie star. So he's a great ambassador for Scientology, right? And they lean heavily on their celebrity ambassadors, very heavily.
His connection with Scientology is the most famous thing about it for me, as someone who doesn't know anything about it.
Of Scientology, yeah.
Yeah. When I think Scientology, I instantly think Tom Cruise.
And they know that's why they are so invested.
And there's something deceiving about the name. I was speaking to a couple of friends the other day, and I mentioned we're going to do worst cults. I was like, oh, we might do Scientology as one of the topics. And they're like, why is Scientology a cult? And like, I probed them further, and their understanding just based off the name is like, oh, I'm anti-religion, Scientology, science. It's a religion based around science.
You would think.
But it's based around science fiction. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
essentially that's where the founder came from. But it is.
I mean, fucking Xenu and Phaeton sounds quite sci-fi to me.
That's exactly what it is. But it is almost alarming to hear that, like, I mean, I think in my head, I thought everyone knew Scientology was a cult, but it is still odd to hear that people like think Scientology is just anti-religion in a sense. Like, I don't believe in religion, I just believe science, which is still, I mean, that could also be a potential draw. Is like, well, I guess I'm not super religious. What else is there? Xenu is what's there.
Yeah, it sounds like they have no basis in science, though. It's just the name.
Well, you have this super fancy machine you hook up to for these sessions, right?
Okay, yeah.
And keep in mind, this was started in the 50s.
So that's pretty advanced.
Yeah, you got wires going back and forth, like needles going back and forth, man.
Yeah.
That's what more do you need, bro? Jesus, let's.
I wonder, was there just like someone who hooked the wire into a machine and was like, hold on to that, and then was like, I know what this means.
Thetans.
This needle you
I
see here.
see the wires doing their thing.
You got aliens in your soul, kid. That's the problem. That's your problem.
But we can fix you.
For $20,000.
I mean, that's essentially what it is, right? It is a business run by one man for his profit that is treated like a church.
Are they a danger to people who aren't Scientologists? Are they a danger to the wider world, or is it just a money-making scheme that if you choose to enter it, well, more
they are a danger in the sense that they are still actively recruiting.
Yeah.
And they are a danger in the sense that if you speak out against them, they will come after you with their masses of people and basically unlimited money.
I mean, Louis Theroux tried, I'm sure he did, made a documentary about Scientology, but then a lot of his documentary is the process of documenting them and him being followed, being harassed. Like, they were aware that he was looking into him, and then they were sending people out to harass him, to threaten him, to get him to stop his investigation into the church.
I mean, if you're, this sounds terrible because nobody likes those door-to-door people who are like, can I talk to you about Jesus for a minute?
Yeah.
You have those in the UK and South Africa?
Yeah.
We got them.
At least they believe in what they are.
Yeah.
They would be happy to tell you what they believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Because they truly believe it.
Because they truly believe it, and they feel like if they can explain it to you, you will be saved
You'll
too.
see the light.
Right? Scientologists seem to feel the opposite, that we need to suck you in through the undertow. We can't actually show you what we believe because we all know that you won't believe it because it's fucking nuts. And and like that's they're not upfront about their beliefs because they themselves have to at some level know it's nuts, and they won't sign up for documentaries because they know they suck, and if they show you, you will know. What sort of church doesn't want any publicity? A church that's doing fucked up things.
Thanks for listening, guys. Please be sure to tune in when we talk about the Jonestown Massacre. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Worst of the Worst Pod, and on Twitter at Worst of Worst Pod. We're also on TikTok and other social media platforms. You can listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Music, anywhere you get your podcasts. Until next time.